The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization Show. I'm your host, Ira Wolf, along with my co-host, Keith Compagna, and our sponsors, JobVite and Success Performance Solutions. Keith, we got a great show ahead. How fitting that this show marks our 12th, a full dozen shows and podcasts under our belt, just 12 days away from 2019. Yeah, pretty
Somebody
coincidental.
Put some thought into this.
Yeah, I've been up all night trying to think of that intro. It's also our last show for 2018. We figured we're going to take a break over Christmas, and day after New Year's, everybody will be getting booted up again. So we will be back on January 9th with a really, really good show. We got Kevin Grossman. We're going to be talking about candidate experience, the Candy Awards. So we've been trying to
the year off.
We've been trying to get Kevin for quite a while. But I've been waiting for our guest today, Danny Iny. Danny contacted me maybe a few weeks ago. I think as soon as I got it, I shared that with you. Offered me a copy of his new book, Leverage Learning. I must have had 3 of these today, and a lot of them I turned down just because I know I'll never get to them. But I didn't make it about halfway through his email. There was a press release with it until I replied yes and sent him an invitation to be on the show.
Right.
Everything from the title down, it just resonated. We're going to take some time, hopefully, with you right at the end. We'll do a recap of 2018. Hopefully, Danny will help us kick that off. But more importantly, looking at a couple things that are going ahead in 2019. But before we get there and before we formally introduce Danny, let's talk about some current events, what's going on. I know, we talk each week. It's the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
Wrapping up. You just got out another meeting. Anything new and exciting?
No, only that there's a lot of positive growth going on. I always compare the pace of technology compared to the pace of human technology.
Yeah, right? Deloitte had that neat curve, which we can't show here. I should probably put that up on the website. That shows the technology is kind of moving straight up. Right. And then you got business, which is trying to adapt. And then you got individuals, which are slower than that. And then you got policy, which is government, which is like flatlined.
We have like Elon Musk says, we have a bandwidth problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
so anyway.
And so I just look at the way that recruiting really and talent acquisition is at the core of every company in terms of people. And you see this convergence of really aggressive technology growth with this very fascinating topic right now as it relates to all things talent, marketplace supply and demand and all the other cultural elements of running a business.
Yeah, I was on a call yesterday, and they obviously the core part of my business is pre-employment testing, leadership testing, and this company was trying to integrate with another platform. We won't mention their name; they're not one of our sponsors, but they were trying to integrate with another platform, and they're all over the place because all we had to ask them is, what's their workflow?
Right.
And which tests do they want to use and when? Mm-hmm. And they couldn't answer that. Well, and this is like 6 months into it. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's pretty crazy.
There's a lot of business in there that's going on right there. It's a very organically growing industry right now. Absolutely. And I think what I certainly experience in my daily routine with JobVite and working with a lot of good companies is that there are different levels of different players in the market. And, I don't want to say you get what you pay for because I think that there are value players out there. But I'm recognizing that you have to be careful out there. You have to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Trust who you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just a little bit of housekeeping here and a couple things going on with me. Other than being busy, I've been updating the website, things I neglected for the last 3 months because I've been on, speaking around the country. But one thing that just came out yesterday, which relates to what we're talking about today, and beyond. I recorded, probably it was about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, I recorded a podcast. I was the guest on that one for HR Daily Advisor. They're part of BLR. A lot of people know who they are. They do some good stuff. I was number 73 on their podcasts. And the title was, "What Will HR Look Like in 2025?" And it was a real good, and it was a good discussion. I believe it. Yeah, I've had a lot of these, and so it was really timely today. And I don't know if you saw this on LinkedIn, but I was doing these mini podcasts. Yeah. They're 2 minutes, so people need to watch for them. I'm sure that could fit into yours. I'll show after the show today. I'll show you how to use it. But it's a new app called Lookwide, LOOKWIDE. Danny might be interested in this as well. It's really, really easy to record. It's another kind of social network. You download the app on your phone. You can, and then I post the link because not everybody has the app, but I post it up to LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. So I've had a nice response so far, but hopefully we'll build that. But we'll be doing summaries of this. And Keith, you got a couple young guys at home. Yeah, 2 boys, 10 and 12. The single father. Have they found any career aspirations yet? I'm so glad you asked me that, because it was like a day or two ago where they both dropped it on me that they're interested in computer programming and development, and I'm thrilled about that because I find it to be right up their alley. But that'll like 2 days ago today, and because we're going to definitely be talking about what skills should they be doing and what's the way, because prior to that. You're a little younger than me, but it was still in the same and in the same kind of model. Is people would say, well, where do you think you want to go to school? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. So, in the past, the pathway to education, from education employment and good paying jobs was pretty clear. You did high school, then some college, and then you started work. And that was sort of the end of it. Many of us in the industry recognize that pathway is broken. And you know better than most because you're my recruiting in the age of Googleization groupie. You read about it. I wrote a title about this, Education to Employment Pathway is Broken. Yeah. That was part of my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googleization. The first sentence in that chapter was, the traditional education to employment pathway is experiencing an all-out assault in its credibility. And then I went on, and there's maybe 9 or 10 pages of that, and I provided a kind of a 10,000-foot view. But our guest, Danny Iny, looks up close and personal. So we're really excited about having them about that. There's so many things that Danny shares in his book that resonates with both of us. It wasn't just a few weeks ago that I published a new article on Rework, which is Cornerstone's blog. Has the college degree lost its luster? A couple other publications called me and wanted to pick that up because they're questioning the same thing. Why do so many people still require a college degree when it has nothing to do with, maybe what that individual is doing? And then, Danny's press release showed up, and the title of it was "Consider Candidates Without a Degree." So, without further delay, let's get into it with our guest, Danny Iny. I've mentioned him a few times already. He's the author of this new book, Leverage Learning, How the Disruption of Education Helps Lifelong Learners and Experts with Something to Teach. Subtitle's rather long, but says it. Danny's the CEO of an online business education company called Mirasee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Which I had to look up to see where the origin was. Kind of an interesting, and it comes from a Latin root, mira, M-I-R-A, which means causing one to smile, which I'm not sure people normally associate that with education. Right. In the past. And Mirasee means to see your vision actualized with your teacher. So pretty cool. Danny's work's followed by over 100,000 experts and professionals. So I'm really excited to welcome Danny to the Geek Skeezers and Googleization show. Welcome, Danny.
Ira, thank you so much for having me. Keith, it's really exciting. I'm thrilled to be here with both of you and with everyone who's listening. Yeah.
Did I say Mirasee right?
You did.
Yeah. Okay. And Iny, right?
Iny, like Iny, meaning mine.
Okay, Iny. Yeah, I get. I've got the similar 3-letter first name, Ira, and it gets Era. How do you say it? It's like, yeah, it's
Thanks
funny. The shorter sometimes it's tougher. Yeah, just a reminder before we dive in. I got a whole lot of questions for Danny here. We are live. And our lines are open. So if you want to talk to me, Keith, or Danny, call us at 561-623-9429. Love to take your questions. Again, 561-623-9429. So Danny, let's start out with something you mentioned quite early in your book. The future is here, just not evenly distributed. What does that mean when it comes to education?
Yeah, so it's not an original quote. That's I was quoting somebody else, and I can look up the name because it's escaping me at the moment. But basically, the idea.
I thought it sounded familiar, and I can't remember. I read it in the book who it was, but anyway.
It's basically the idea that when we look ahead to like, oh, here are all the great things that are coming. You see the stuff that's in a science fiction lab or something. The reality is that it already exists in the world. Like most of what we're talking about is, oh, this is hypothetical. This is coming. It actually already exists. It just doesn't exist in the world in all places at the same time. Right. So, case in point, we're talking about like the way we have digital connectivity today. So, there are lots of places where you have, gigabit connectivity, super high speeds, no latency, all perfect. There are also lots of places in the world where you can't even dial dial-up yet. Right. So it's not that the pace of progress is uniform. Well, there you go.
Yeah, we can be in Central Africa and people can get the internet, but but you can be in we're not too far from where we are here, and you can't, and people are on dial-up or have no access.
So, but in the context of education, right? A core part of what I believe and argue in the book, and my understanding is that you have a similar perspective from your work that I've seen. The college degree as a generic magic ticket to the successful life is just not working anymore. It costs too much. It delivers too little. And that is the case more and more in the world, but there's still going to be holdover pockets. And so it's very easy for someone to say, yeah, but here's a job listing that says requires this degree. But that doesn't invalidate where things are going. It just means it hasn't saturated the entire landscape yet.
No, absolutely. I actually have your book in front of me, and I was looking for a quote somewhere, and it had there it was. And it was actually a quote from Ryan Craig, College Disrupted. It said, working at the minimum wage in the late 1970s, a typical student at a 4-year college degree, and I graduated early 1970s, so this is pretty applicable, can pay their entire tuition by working 182 hours. That's a part-time summer job. Wow. But in 2013, the same student at the same college at the current minimum wage would have to work 991 hours, a year and a half full-time just to pay that education. And that's probably a state school.
Right.
That's probably a school with low education. So, you're absolutely correct. You mentioned pretty early on, too, you kind of indirectly hit this. You mentioned signals as a good way to monitor the disruption or how significant the disruption is going to be. What are some examples of those signals that you see happening in education?
Well, in the context of education, the big signal that I've been looking at is the college degree, but not as in what does it tell us about what's coming, but rather the deterioration of its value, right? Because a college degree in and of itself has never been valuable for anything, right? It's only a proxy for what you as the person holding the degree know or are able to do, right? So this is like a shorthand, right? So an employer can't say, well, I'm going to test all of your abilities and skills and work with you for a year. I need to be able to assess whether you're going to be good at something. It's like, okay, Harvard says you're good. That's good enough for me.
Right.
Right? So that's all it's ever been. The problem is that, and not just Harvard, but any university historically, the value of that degree has been deteriorating. It just doesn't carry the weight that it used to. And post-graduation employment and underemployment and unemployment data shows that this is the case. It just doesn't carry the weight anymore. So that is the signal that has completely deteriorated.
So I mean, there's so many cool things in your book. I saw this, and I'm going to ask your permission to steal it, or would give you credit.
We don't steal, we liberate.
But you have a graphic right in the beginning, and it has Diploma, and it says, "I vouch that John is smart, hardworking, well-to-do, from a good family, and also knows a thing or two about whatever he studied." And that's pretty much what companies are still tend to be relying on, that somebody has not necessarily a high school diploma, because that doesn't have the worth that it did. But they either have a 2-year associate degree, they have a BS or a BA, 4-year degree, or they have, even a postgraduate degree.
Right.
But I love that. I mean, it took it down to pretty simple of how companies still tend to rely on that it says, well, this person went to school, so they're smart.
Well, and that's what I'm kind of on both sides of this equation, because, I observe how the landscape is changing and I advocate for that change. I also run a company and I'm also an employer. And so when you're looking to hire people, you need some way of sorting through everyone who's applying, right? If you have 200 people apply for a job, you need some way of deciding who is worth, never mind hiring, but even just exploring without spending a day talking to each and every person, because that's just impossible.
Right.
And so historically, the degree was a great shorthand. It was a great heuristic for that, right? The fact that you have a college degree, especially not like less now, but let's say 30 years ago, 50 years ago, that tells me that you value education, you meet a certain minimum bar of being able to work hard, you have the financial wherewithal to go to school and get that degree, whether that means you come from wealth and affluence or that you just have the resourcefulness to have figured out another path, right? It tells me that you check a lot of boxes. And so it's a really good starting point, except things have changed a lot since then, right? And among those changes is just the ubiquity of the degree, right? It used to be that a small minority of the population got a university degree. Now more people do, and that's a great thing. But it also means that having a university degree is not a differentiator in the way that it was 30 years ago.
So what do you see the key differentiators that are rising to the surface?
And with that, we're actually we're a little past our normal break time, but we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, that was actually my right question too. In my book, I wrote about using badges, but let's talk about, rather than having that resume, and part of that resume is a degree.
Yeah.
What are going to and good keywords.
Right.
What are some of the ways that companies need to start looking, or individuals need to start representing themselves of what their credentials are? So you've been listening to and hopefully you're still listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We have our guest today, Danny Iny, the author of Leverage Learning. We're talking about the disruption that's happening in education. And when we come back from our break, we're going to be talking a lot more about what companies should be looking for as far as credentials of the future, and what individuals, candidates and job seekers should be telling and promoting themselves are. What are those skills? We're talking, as I said, we're talking about education. We're going to take a short break, hear from our sponsors, JobVite and Success Performance Solutions. So stay right where you are. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
What's up, everyone? This is Keith from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, powered by JobVite. JobVite knows career paths are made by people, not by open job requisitions. JobVite's platform ties recruitment marketing directly to applicant tracking and onboarding, creating continuous candidate engagement that effectively connects recruiters with qualified passive candidates. Used by over 50,000 recruiters placing over 1 million jobs, JobVite's platform impacts every company in every industry. Check us out at jobvite.com.
Listen carefully. Up to 9 out of 10 job candidates visiting your company career page leave before completing an application. You heard that right. 90% of candidates who want to apply for a job at your company don't. That's just plain crazy, especially in today's tight labor market. Candidate experience matters. Stop turning candidates away. Let Success Performance Solutions help. Call us at 800-803-4303 or register at successperformancesolutions.com/W4CY. Schedule a no-obligation consultation and get special access to insider tips to recruit faster and hire smarter.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Today we have Danny Iny with us. Ira Wolf's my co-host, and if you don't forget, we're live here. If this education or how to get from education to employment in the modern day is something that you like, call us at 561-623-9429. Just before the break, Danny, we were talking about what's that like option there, and my question to ask you is the manner in which the education system now has lost its value. I guess that's the way I could use as few words as possible, right? It's lost its market value. What does the disruption look like? Because it seems like there's a lot of disruption going on anymore. So what's going on that's really kind of satisfying the need?
I love that question because it's an enormous question. We can go in like 15 different directions with it.
Let's do it.
So let's start with, because you asked right before the break, you asked about badging and credentialization. Essentially, if saying, well, I went to this school and I get this degree doesn't carry that signal anymore, like what is the new signal? And it's a really challenging question because signals are only useful when other people acknowledge their value, right? So if you see someone walking down the street and they've got a police badge, right, you know that means something. But if you see someone walking down the street and they're wearing a T-shirt with a Superman logo on it, right, you might like Superman, but like that doesn't carry any weight or authority. And it doesn't matter if that really is a superhero or not, right? The shirt doesn't tell you anything because all of us as a society don't see that as a measure of that value or carrying a lot of significance or meaning. And we're in this really challenging space where the old signal has kind of fallen apart, but we don't have a good new signal to replace it yet. There are a lot of alternative educational pathways, right? There are coding boot camps, there are alternative programs, there are online courses, there's a million different things people can do. But it's kind of challenging in that saying I take a lot of online courses is kind of like saying I read a lot of books or I read a lot of articles or I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like it doesn't really mean anything, and that's partially because the quality of courses out there is highly variable and the completion rates are not impressive and all that kind of stuff. So there isn't a single pathway where it's like you find the one right path and like that's your new signal. What you really have to do as someone seeking to succeed in life, to find employment, is you have to construct the signal yourself. So from the perspective of the individual, you want to look at building portfolios. Right? You want to look at how can I demonstrate what I know how to do and the quality of my work. And from the perspective of the employer, you need to, look for those things when they already exist, but recognizing that most people don't have, ready, easy to access portfolios, you want to design a hiring process that is much more based on simulation than on past experience.
So, I was asked, I was interviewed a couple months ago by Cornerstone, and the topic was the resume of the future. They talked to 25 different people. I was fortunate enough to be among them. Right. So based on what you just said, and there, and Keith, I know will agree with this. There's a huge mismatch between how companies search and representing the skills that individual has. And we still use an application, we still use a resume, but because of technology, it's still sort of based on keyword search. But that seems to be a bit dysfunctional. When we get into building a portfolio, how does someone today put a portfolio together in a way that can meet the way that companies hire. Because, obviously, if I've got a great portfolio of skills and I pitch it to the company, but it doesn't fit into their existing application format, how do I get it? How do I get that to resonate through? Vice versa is, have you seen any companies leading the way in changing how they're looking at the credentials of individuals? And technology is probably one of those industries, but have you seen it in any other industries? So there's probably 5 questions in there, Danny.
There's a lot.
I counted at least 3, but let's see how far we get.
Good luck, Danny.
So in terms of what the applicant can do, it's a good question, but the answer is different when you're answering an individual asking the question versus when you're saying kind of what should all applicants do. Because you're absolutely right. The systems that are out there right now, they're not geared to take on portfolios and real demonstrations of talent and capability. They're not designed for that. So the right answer for an individual who asks the question, how can I get through, is that basically you need to bypass the existing systems. If your application is good enough and compelling enough and you get it in front of the right person, then it doesn't really matter that this is the existing structure. They're like, well, I've got a good candidate and I'm good. Right? And you can do all the creative stuff around, how do you network your way to building the relationships with the right people, or figure out who are the decision makers and send them a FedEx envelope with something lumpy inside so they absolutely open it and take a look. Like, you get really creative as a kind of guerrilla marketer marketing yourself. That works for individuals. It doesn't work if everybody tries to do that. Then all the systems just completely break down. And when you want a solution that's not about the single, unique, taking charge creative applicant, but rather across the board, it's really the system that has to be re-engineered. And I can tell you what we do at my company, which I think is a little bit progressive, and at least it works very well for us. So we don't look at resumes at all, at all in the hiring process. I've not looked at the resume of any person who works for me. What we do is we say, okay, we're looking to hire. Here's the call for applications. People click through, and that takes them to a form that asks them a whole bunch of questions. And some of it is stuff like, so why do you want this job? Why are you best suited for this job? Here are a bunch of scenarios. How would you handle this? What is your best experience? Then we tie that with assessments, and we tie that with simulation type stuff. And we go through the process, because I frankly don't care what background somebody has if they can do the job. I just need to know if they can do the job and do it well. And it actually is a process that works very well, both for finding really great people. You also tend to get much more diverse candidates when you're not looking at their resumes. You're not even looking at their names until they're like fourth step into the process, because it just saves you time to do it that way.
It's literally, it's just amazing as I'm going through this is, when I'm speaking to companies and looking at their 5-page PDF resume that they're trying to get somebody to fill out as the first glance, and then, register, have an account, and go through all the, the different hurdles. It's like, what are the 4 or 5 questions? That's what you just said. What are the 4 or 5 questions that you have to know? What are the skills? It may be even something as, are you available to work weekends or evenings or days, or can you travel?
Exactly what it is.
Who cares? Not only are the names loaded with conscious bias, and areas, but there's a whole, people collect so much information before they get down to the nitty gritty. And it sounds like what you're doing is you're almost putting the interview early. You're asking the questions that typically don't get asked until maybe a screening or a first interview.
How's that for a novel idea?
Yeah, ask
I would
that
actually,
first.
I'd say no. It's almost the opposite of that, because there's 2 sides to what happens in the interview. Part of it is like asking questions to things that you really want to know. And yeah, you should do that first. I don't know why people wait till the end. But the challenge with interviewing as a process is that our brains are wired to be very good at telling us whether or not we will get along with a person. Like, is this someone I will be friends with? Our brains are not good at telling us whether or not this is a person who will be good at this particular job. And so when we lead with the interview, like as an interview in a conversation, the impression we're forming is not, is this a great candidate to hire? It's, is this someone I'd want to have drinks with after work? And that's a terrible criteria to hire based on. So we try to go through the entire process of, based on their answers, based on their assessments, based on everything, do I feel like they can do the job? And then the chemistry still matters if everything else is in place. But if you start with the interview, I find we tend to get a lot of false positives.
Well, I've got a whole bunch of questions now I have to ask you. In terms of, my curiosity, I guess, really just starts and stops with, how did you get here? You're talking about something that I think has fantastic market value, and I think it also has a phenomenal place in modern company culture, or at least the progressive companies that are trying to, take on these modern day recruitment type culture approaches that support things like a gig economy, right? How did you get into this kind of a position where you're recognizing the value of this? Like, did something go dramatically wrong along your way? What happened?
Of course, that's how entrepreneurs learn anything.
Right? Okay.
My first attempt at building a company of meaningful size was about 10-ish years ago, 11 years ago. And I was a young, inexperienced CEO, and I basically did everything wrong. I didn't look at any of the right criteria. I hired my friends, not because they were going to be good at the job, but because I liked them. And, you figure if you like someone, they must be good at everything, which was not the case. And I just made all the mistakes I can make, and that company fell apart because I was young and didn't know what I was doing, and that's fine. I got over it, and I moved on to the next thing. But when it came time to start hiring people again, and this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I was like, okay, this time I'm going to get it right. And so I looked a little bit at the research around what do we actually know when you look at HR research, when you look at human behavior research, and there's a glut of that just hasn't made into best practices in organizations. What do we know about what works and what doesn't? And I was like, most of the way that people do things in the conventional business world is contrary to everything the data tells us is actually effective. So I just looked at all the data and I was like, based on this, what makes sense? What does the data tell us? What does the science tell us is a process that would work? And we've iterated it over the years, but it's been fairly robust for most of that time. It's just, instead of saying what have people always done, it's like what do we know as a learned society about how things should work and how they will be effective, and just build systems based on that.
So you've been listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. We're with our guest, Danny Iny, author of Leveraged Learning and the CEO of Mirasee. We've been talking about the disruption of education, kind of the disconnect between employment and education. And we've got a whole lot of additional questions we're going to have, but we're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
What's up, everyone? This is Keith from the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, powered by JobVite. JobVite knows career paths are made by people, not by open job requisitions. JobVite's platform ties recruitment marketing directly to applicant tracking and onboarding, creating continuous candidate engagement that effectively connects recruiters with qualified passive candidates. Used by over 50,000 recruiters placing over 1 million jobs, JobVite's platform impacts every company in every industry. Check us out at jobvite.com.
Listen carefully. Up to 9 out of 10 job candidates visiting your company career page leave before completing an application. You heard that right. 90% of candidates who want to apply for a job at your company don't. That's just plain crazy, especially in today's tight labor market. Candidate experience matters. Stop turning candidates away. Let Success Performance Solutions help. Call us at 800-803-4303 or register at successperformancesolutions.com/W4CY. Schedule a no-obligation consultation and get special access to insider tips to recruit faster and hire smarter.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. This is Keith Compagna. I'm with Ira Wolf, host and extraordinaire recruiter Google guy. and Danny Iny from Leverage Learning, and just a guy who knows what's going on as it relates to really promoting individual achievement. Don't be satisfied with, well, at least what I'm getting from you, Danny, is that, there's plenty of opportunity out there to take advantage of the marketplace in terms of getting the kind of job you want, regardless of what the old scope or the old structure of recruiting looks like.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm on the other side with JobVite on the HR side, and I ran a staffing agency, so I know all too well how at least nobody ever qualified me, but I think you're spot on with something here. My own personal experience being in sales is that I've always approached every job interview like a buying process. So they want to see what my follow-up quality is like. They want to see what kind of a network I have in a similar fashion that it would be for anyone who's looking to buy the software. And it sounds a lot to me like you're promoting that concept to not just sales, but to anyone, regardless of where they are now. Just think about where you want to be. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. One of the big shifts we've seen in the economy as a whole over the last couple of decades is a disintermediation, right? It used to be that, if you want to buy a house, you go through a real estate agent. If you want to book a plane ticket, you go through a travel agent. Like, you have all these intermediaries in between, and a variety of things, the flattening of technology and easy access to information and all that has eliminated a lot of those middlemen. And that's great on a lot of levels. It gives us a lot more control, a lot more access. It reduces costs. But it also means we have to be good at certain things that we weren't necessarily good at before, right? It used to be the travel agent, if they were good at what they were doing, would plan the itinerary of your trip. Now you have to do that yourself, right? And in the context of, we've seen this a lot over the last decade or two for entrepreneurs and freelancers, right? Where it used to be that you found a job and you're in the job doing the thing that you're technically doing. Now everybody's a freelancer, and so it's not enough to just be good at the technical stuff. You also have to be good at finding the clients and doing the work. And so in much the same way, as the signal of the degree starts falling apart and the career services departments start just not being able to keep up, which they already aren't. I think the ratio is something like 3,000 students to one career services professional, which is possible, right? Wow. All of a sudden, we need as individuals to just take more responsibility for how do we get to where we want to be in our careers. And I'm very optimistic about that, right? Sometimes, people hear me talk about this stuff and they're like, aren't you pessimistic? Does this mean it's all going to hell, basically? And I say, no, when I look at an industry that is 4.4 to 6 point something trillion dollars, depending on the number you look at, which is education globally, higher education is about $1.9 trillion a year in the US. And when you look at how misused so much of that money is and how little of a return people are getting, it's like, that's essentially almost $2 trillion that could be better deployed to get amazing results. So there's nowhere to go but up. So I'm very excited.
So what are some of the best online learning kind of options that are out there? As you mentioned before, I mean, you want to learn how to do something, go to YouTube. But there's there's Coursera. There's a lot of schools that offer things. Everybody has an online course about something. Keith's got some young guys. There's people looking for career changes. They want to learn a new school. What are some of the best options that are available that you've seen?
So it's a great question, and I would like to come at it from the opposite direction, because which online course should I take is kind of like the new digital version of where should I go to school, right? Good point. Kind of presupposes, okay, I'm going to school, I'm going to take a course, I just need to pick which one. And what you need to do is turn that on its head, start with the end and work backwards. So, at the end of this educational episode, whatever it will be, where do I want to be? Where do I want to go, right? What is the door that I'm hoping it will open? Then we go a step back and we say, well, in order for that door to open, what is it that I need to know? What is it that I need to be able to do? What is it that I need to understand? And I'd go a level deeper and say, not just what do I need to know and what do I need to be able to do, but how well do I need to know it? How well do I need to be able to do it? And when you have that list, I would, because of course, which online course you should take depends on which industry you want to go into, which stage of life, what you want to do, all that kind of stuff. But when you have answers to those questions, it's not that hard to go to the kind of people you want to ultimately work with, or you want ultimately their approval of, and say, hey, can I talk to you for 10 minutes? This is where I want to be. And I think that in order to get there, I need to learn and understand these things at this level. Can you tell me, A, is that accurate? And B, if it is accurate, what's the best place for me to get that? What's the best place for me to learn that? Because people who are practitioners in the field, boots on the ground, they will know. They will know what it takes to get there.
Absolutely. And part of what I think makes this work is the idea that along with, the abandonment rate of technology in terms of applicants online and, void of mobile technology, blah, 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 one of the key elements is that people are leaving jobs quicker. So if you want people to, and a secondary element that's impacting companies is a lack of a leadership program, because you don't have enough people sticking around. So here, Danny comes in and it's basically expressing the idea of if you can come to terms with being that development program, you'll still win more than you lose.
Well, and keeping in mind also that the challenge with any kind of data set is that it's very easy to look at it and draw the wrong conclusions, right? So, one of the things that we hear a ton is how, the new generation, millennials, they just don't stay in jobs, right? They're job hopping left and right. I was just looking at data recently, and I have to pull the source because I don't remember who published the study. But it's actually not completely true, right? The fact of millennials hopping from job to job is partially a function, of course, of the whole industry and world changing. But it's also a stage of life thing, right? Because millennials 5 and 10 years ago were kids in their early 20s, and kids in their early 20s weren't in long-term permanent positions in general throughout history. Now the average length of time that a millennial stays in a job is about 4 years. As they get older and as they have kids and as they have, all the things that make you want to settle down. There's, this other really interesting data set that I was looking at that I think it's something like half of the people who will be hired in a job will not be in that job 18 months later. Right. But then it's well, why not? Right. It's usually it's not a function of technical skills. It's not a function of subject matter ability. It's a function of culture fit. It's a function of they weren't able to work well with other people, soft skills. So it's important that for people who are saying, I want to set myself up, not just for landing a job, but for keeping it, being successful in a career, I have to be good at the technical stuff I need to do, but I also need to be the kind of person that, irrespective of the specific subject matter task at hand, I'm the kind of person that people will want on their team.
Right. And with, I write a lot about, and that was the theme of my whole book, is where automation is going to come into this. If you only have a skill, if you only have a technical skill, then that likely can be duplicated or replaced by a job.
Unless you're unbelievably good.
Correct. Yeah. Right.
Automation gets pretty good too. But yes.
But then that goes back to your standards of these schools. So if you're one of 100,000 people that graduate with a programming degree, your need now is good. But in time, a lot of those basic functions or even intermediate skills will likely be automated. Right. Or replaced, and therefore at least a portion of the job that you have now is going to be different than what it would be in the future.
Well, there's a broader question there, right? Because we've heard all these things about how the hottest jobs today didn't exist 15 years ago, and we're training people now for jobs that don't exist yet, and how do we prepare someone for that uncertain world? And in the next breath, you usually hear people say, well, that means we need to train everyone to be a computer programmer or a data scientist. And I roll my eyes at that because I'm like, well, first of all, most of the economy is not data scientists. But second of all, if you're saying that the whole world is changing, we don't know where it's going, our best guess as to where it's going now is probably not a good guess, right? So it's less about giving people the specific skills they need, which they're going to have to pick up on a just-in-time basis anyway. And it's more about what are the things that make someone a valuable member of a team, regardless of their technical skills.
Right. The core value adds that actually help you in your career path as well as your personal development.
Yeah. Hey, Danny, we're coming up toward the end. So one is I want to make sure that you're able to give out how people can reach you and get in touch with you and obviously get your book. But I do have one question, which led into what Keith was talking about before. If we would love to have you back next year, which is coming up quick, but maybe mid-year or later in the year. If we have a conversation, what do you think is going to change? I mean, what do you think are going to be on this topic? What's going to be the major headlines at the end of 2019? Good or bad, that's going to relate to how education, credentials is going to fit. What do you think we've been talking about?
It's a big question. So here's the thing. We started this conversation.
I get asked that all the time. So
we started the conversation saying that that the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. So I think it's less a question of what will happen and more a question of how fast will it happen. We're already seeing rapid declinements in college enrollment. College enrollment has declined 7% in the last 5 years. And that means we're looking at like 1.5 million-ish people every year saying, okay, not college, but then what? Mm-hmm. So I think depending on how fast things play out, I think a year from now, we could start seeing just a rising feeling in public opinion and in the media of like, okay, college seems to be not the path for a lot of people for whom it used to be the path, but there's going to be a lot of hand-wringing of, and then what? Because it's such a consequential decision where anywhere you land on it, if you get it wrong, you feel like you're screwed.
Yeah, no, right? Absolutely, for sure. So, hey, Danny, how can people get in contact with you? What's the easiest way to get your book? Lay it on us.
Sure. So the book is called Leveraged Learning. It is available where good books are sold, which is most bookstores, but really these days, mostly Amazon. You can't get easier than that as a shopping experience. But for people who just want to take a look, if you go to leveragedlearningbook.com, the whole book is there for free. I don't make money selling books. I have a whole business for that. So I just want to get the word out there about these ideas. I think $1.5 trillion of debt in the U.S. is way too much for way too little. So leveragedlearningbook.com.
Yeah, and you're on LinkedIn, I know, because we connected, and Twitter.
Absolutely.
Follow you.
I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter.
Okay, so LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's the best bet. Or go up to the website and just contact you. So,
Mirasee.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you have a great message. Obviously, it resonates really well with me and Keith. And wish you the best of luck and happy holidays and a good new year. And we definitely want to get you back.
Thank you. I will look forward to that. And to you and to everyone who's listening, happy holidays and a wonderful, prosperous, fulfilling new year.
Hey, thanks very much, Danny.
Thank you so much, Danny.
You're listening to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Our guest today was Danny Iny. He was the author of Leveraged Learning and the CEO of Mirasee, Mirasee. You can go up and look at that. Hey, before we close, we just have a couple minutes here, Keith. Yeah. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Danny.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, hopefully we're sitting next to each other a year from now, still doing the show. We'll at that point we'll have close to 50 shows under our belt.
We'll be professionals.
What are we going to be talking about? What do you think is going to be the headline that's going to grab everybody's attention?
Well, I think by that time there's going to be a different attitude towards the economy. I think that the natural next step to the way the unemployment rate is that business will slow down, which will impact a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. Will it be at the end of 2019 or 2020? We will see. That, I think that, we'll have the election coming up. We'll be one more year closer to the election. So who knows what kind of stuff will be coming up then.
That won't suck the energy out of the room, will it?
What about you? What do you think we'll be talking about in a year?
Well, obviously, I think there's going to be continued disruption. Danny mentioned this, it's how fast things happen. Mm-hmm. And you know my feeling on that. It's just going to happen faster and faster. I think, some of the things that happened over the last 18 months with Google, I think people overlook it. It's like, oh, it's another tool, Google for Jobs. Mm-hmm. Or Google, I have that new ebook, Google My Business. But Google is changing the way people search. I mean, it's how they find jobs. It's changing the way companies do it. It's behavior economics. I mean, the reality is they recognized what people want and they're giving it to them. And it's a matter of technology keeping up. and the business is adopting that technology. Right. And as we talked about for the last hour, how we change those processes. Yeah. And then, beginning in the year, it's just one more thing, added to the belt. I think Indeed, Indeed's going to change the way they're recruiting. They're already decided, staffing firms and recruiters, can't post their jobs for free, which is going to, make it more difficult to get their jobs visible. So I think underlying that, I think those are things that people get upset with on a day-to-day basis. But underlying that, it's going to create even a downstream of disruption. So that's what I would keep an eye on.
Well, I can't finish, but I got to say the rise of the human value is coming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my topics next year, kind of an offshoot of the recruiting in the age of Googleization, is how do you keep the H in you and HR. So we'll be doing that. Hey, we're just at the end. Yes, this is our last show for 2018. We wish everybody the happiest of holidays, a very healthy new year. We will be back. We will have rebroadcasts on the 26th and the 2nd of January. So you can listen to one of our other shows. And January 9th will be our first show of 2019.
Kevin Grossman.
And Kevin Grossman from the Talent Board. And we'll be talking a lot about candidate experience and continuing those topics. So I want to thank Keith for being here alongside me. I want to thank Chad for being our engineer in background, and Dean and Dean for getting me into this, for introducing me to W4CY.com. And I appreciate it. So until 2019, everybody have a very healthy, safe holiday, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yep.